Let's try another one. So 84, again, we have the letter or the variable on the right side, so I'm going to change it around. It is m, it's pointing there, so 1.5. So this is going to be an open circle, so 1.5 is roughly right here, 1.5, and it is less than, so it is going to the left. Okay, let's try a few more, a little bit more complicated. I'm going to go all the way down to maybe a more complicated one, like 91. So 91, there is a multiple step problem. This is a multiple step problem. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. So let me just rewrite this. Less than or equal to -1. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. And so I get x over 2 is greater than or equal to -4, because the signs are the same. Therefore, I add. In order to get rid of that 2, I'm going to multiply by 2, multiply by 2. So x is greater than or equal to -8. So on my graph, I'm going to look for -8. And I'm going to shade the inside of my circle because it's greater than or equal to. And draw my arrow. 93 is quite similar. So I'm just going to distribute, so I get -21 plus 7a greater than 140, and then I'm going to add 21, so 7a is greater than 161, divide by 7, so a is greater than 161 divided by 7, 23. Now I'm going to go back to my graph. I'm going to look for the number 23. It's going to be an open circle and it's bigger, so it should go that way. Okay, so the rest of these are very similar. They are multiple step problems. I will try to do, let's say, 101. Okay, so let's do number 101 right here. So -7 plus 35p plus 40 is greater than or equal to -3p plus 33. And I'm actually distributing this on both sides. Okay, I'm going to combine like terms. So 40 minus 7 would actually be 33 plus 35p is greater than or equal to -3p plus 33. So I am now going to subtract 33 from both sides. That cancels, so I get 35p is greater than or equal to -3p. I'm going to put all of my p's on one side. So I'm going to add 3p and add 3p to the side. 38p is greater than or equal to 0, so p is greater than or equal to 0. I'm going to look for my 0, mark it, color it in, and then draw my arrow. And I'm done. Okay, so the next section has compound inequalities. Some of them is an or problem and some of them are and problems. I think the most difficult one is something that looks like number 104. So let me mark that as 104. And the reason is because it's a compound inequality. So I'm going to write this. Actually, I'm going to scoot this over. Okay. And I'm going to be able to write this problem right here. So 4x minus 17 is less than or equal to 5x plus 12 is less than 4x minus 1. So you got to think of it as 3 sides. So if I subtract 12 here, I also have to subtract it from the left and also the right. So I then get 4x minus 29 less than or equal to 5x is less than 4x negative 13. Okay, and from here I still want x alone, but my x's are not in the same spot. So I need all of my x's in the middle. So I'm going to subtract 4x, subtract 4x, subtract 4x. And I'm going to cancel here and cancel there. So then I get x and negative 13 and negative 29. If I take a look at my graph, they have done that for me. So my negative 29 is going to be an open circle, and my negative 13 is also an open circle. Actually, 29 would be a closed circle because it's less than or equal to. I just forgot to do that. And then it's in between, therefore, I'm going to shade the in between. And then you're done. Let's try a couple more. So 105, if I actually did that, it is an and problem. So separately, 3a minus 6 is greater than 9. And then you have 5 minus 6a is greater than negative 43. So I'm going to do the same thing. So 3a greater than 15. So a is greater than 5. That's one answer. And then I'm going to subtract 5. So negative 6a is less than negative 48. And because I divided by a negative, my sign now switches. So negative 48 divided by negative 6 is actually 8. So this is also an answer. And I'm going to graph. So here's my open circle at 5. Here's my open circle at 8. It's bigger than 5, less than 8. I could, in fact, write it out as a compound inequality. Okay, so now we move on to the next section for inequalities with absolute values, which is all of these. Now the main idea is to keep the absolute value alone or isolated. And let's try a complicated one. Well, we'll do two. We could do 109 first and then try 111. So 109 is already alone. Therefore, I have 2n plus 9 absolute value less than negative 5. Automatically, we know that any absolute value cannot be, if it's less than and it's a negative number, this answer is simply no solution, because no absolute value will ever be a negative number. So that one was an easy one. But you have to learn how to identify. So let's say, for example, before I do 111, let's say an example would be 3x minus 1, absolute value minus 5 is greater than, let's say, negative 8. Well, even if I add 5 to both sides, I would still have greater than negative 3. And this could, in fact, work, but because there is a negative, it may or may not work. So in this case, I would do both shots. So 3x minus 1 is greater than negative 3, or 3x minus 1 is less than positive 3. So in this case, I'm going to add. So 3x is greater than negative 2, so x is greater than negative 2 over 3. Or 3x is less than 4, so x is less than 4 over 3. In which case, the absolute value would just not be able to be negative. So if I plugged in a negative 2 over 3, if I plug this in, I'd get negative 2 minus 1, which is 3, and 3 is bigger than 3. Yes, so that would work. And if I plug this in, 4 minus 3 is 3. 3 is greater than negative 3, and this one would also work. So it depends. Okay, so moving on to number 111. There's a few numbers that are in the way. Just so happens it's the same number, but those negative 8s are in the way. So I'm going to add 8 to both sides. So I get negative 8, absolute value 9 minus 5a, absolute value greater than or equal to 48. And when I divide by a negative 8, I get a negative 6. So 9 minus 5a, absolute value is, change the sign. I forgot to do that. So less than or equal to negative 6. And in this case, it's less than or equal to. So that's what you have to pay attention to, because less than or equal to, well, if it's equal to negative 6 and it's less than or equal to, the absolute value is always going to have to be positive. And no positive number in this case is going to be larger than a negative 6. So number 111 is also a no solution. Now let's try one that's actually going to give us a solution. So let's try number 112. 112, I'm going to add 10 to both sides. So I'm going to circle that. So 7, absolute value 7n minus 1, absolute value less than 56, negative 56. I'm going to divide by 7. So 7n minus 1 is absolute value of negative 8. So it has to be less than 8. Which again, we come into the same issue of no number is going to be positive that's less than negative 8. So last but not least, let's try to do one that actually works. So let's do 108. 108 states that 4 plus x, absolute value is less than 5. So I'm going to split my two equations because all absolute value inequalities or equations will be two answers. So I have 4 plus x is less than or equal to 5, and 4 plus x is greater than or equal to negative 5. Notice that I did not change whatever was in my absolute value. Okay, so that's important to remember. I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides, so I get 1 as my answer. I'm going to subtract 4, so negative 9 is also my answer. They're both closed circles, so here is a 1, and then I'm going to close my circle, and here is negative 9, and I'm going to close my circle, and it's less than 1, but greater than negative 9. So that would be my answer. Okay, so moving on into the next section. The next section is on proportions. Proportions are very easy, especially when you have two fractions. Well, it is a proportion because all you really have to remember is cross multiply. So let's try with 117. I'm going to cross multiply here. So I get 3b equals cross multiply there. So I get 25b plus 35. Now I want my b's all to be on the same side. So I'm going to subtract 25b from both sides. So I essentially get negative 22b equals 35. And 35 divided by 22, or negative 22, is in fact negative 35 over 22, because you can't simplify. Okay, let's try one more. Let's say we had something a little bit more complicated, like 115. So cross multiply, again, you're going to cross multiply. So I get 4v minus 4 equals 9v plus 63 because I cross multiplied. Now I can put my numbers and letters on the same side. So I'm going to subtract 4v from both sides and I'll get 5v. And then I'm going to subtract 63 from both sides and I get negative 67, and so v equals negative 67 over 5, or 13.4. Or 13.4. Okay, so any proportion problem, you are going to be cross multiplying.